Good morning. Please release any tension about the intention of others when they tell you that they cannot play your way. To say, have a good day. However, if you react to them in a way that will say, well, there is no room for you in my world, then they will say, fine, and they will slam the door on you. And then they will go away. And that is okay. However, the room you're in is going to begin to be access to landing in a hostile environment because then you'll be subject to the hostility of those outside the door, right? Who is talking to me? Wendell Holmes is talking to you. Well, maybe, but do I care? Would I rather be um, hanging out with them and dealing with their hostility, having to live among them? Yes, I don't really see it. At least I have time to myself in my room where I can enjoy myself and they can go do their own thing. And if I have to live with them, then I have to put up with it constantly. I can't have any fun. I guess my only fun is to be able to stand up to them after so long of having been in them and just say, go away. That's kind of feels good to me. Understand that if they go away and they're angry at you, they will continue to bother you one way or another, right? If I come out of my room, yeah. What do you do about a kid that has to go to school or church and has to put up with all that bullshit? Is that something we create inside ourselves somehow? And we can stop if we could stop and turn them into the kind of people we want them to be? There is some disagreement on this point, I see. So let me think about it. So, what you're saying is that when you grow up, you have to be subjected to all these people with all their BS, and you're miserable because it doesn't fit together in a way that would say, well, this makes sense today, this makes sense today. It's just a form of misery that you go through while you're growing up. And then when you're grown up, you say, get away from me, because I don't want to have to be treated like a piece of shit by you. And I don't want to let you think that I agree with you, that you can treat others like piece of shit and your children too. And all that does is make them angry, right? Probably. I mean, normally I'm fine with people telling me um, to look at things a different way, but this is not making sense to me. If it made sense to me, I would say yes, but I guess I have a different point of view. I'm angry right now because of the suggestion that I should come out of my sandbox and have to play in their sandbox when they throw sand. And are you afraid of me? Do you think I'm going to come into your sandbox and throw sand in your face? Daily trust on anger is not a problem for you. No, why should it be? If you see somebody raping somebody on the street and people are standing around watching, wouldn't you be angry? Yes, I would be. I would be very angry. I would have a lot of adrenaline, probably, in order to face off with the rapist, but I would be angry at the people that just stood around and watched and let this girl be assaulted like that. Exactly. There's nothing wrong with anger. It's not anger, that I'm worried about. It's their asinine attitudes where they are the rapists or they're condoning the rapists. It's like that woman the other day who said that something. She might not be the one that, goes out and strings up somebody they don't like, but she would train her children that way. She might not be Hamas that goes into, but she trains her children to be Hamas by her actions and her hatred of others. And that makes me angry, a little hot under the collar. I'm not too angry because I just tell them to go away. I don't tell them to go away. Well, I do might, depending upon the situation. But people who think they have the right to tell other people how to think or what to do tend to make me angry. And of course, you can play any way you want. The way I see it, there's enough sandboxes for everybody. Everybody has their own sandbox, right? Anyway, doesn't everybody have their own sandbox? Can't be sure of that, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure if everybody has their own sandbox, like their own world or not. I haven't figured that one out. So maybe it's half a dozen of one and six of the other. What do you think? I tend to think that too. I tend to think that's a duality. Everybody's in the same sandbox and yet everybody has their own. So what I'm thinking is that you can so you have to find a solution to that. And the solution to me is the sharing of reality. That you share your reality by talking about it with others. And you and I are talking about it right now. And you're sharing your thoughts and I'm sharing mine. So if I were in that other world with all those people, came out of my room and they're raping somebody or saying something to somebody including me that is taking advantage of them, manipulating them for their own egotistical advantage or um, their own personal need to stand on the backs of others to elevate themselves in whatever way they need to. If I stand up to them, wouldn't their anger be against me? If I stood up to the rapists, wouldn't they take after me as well? Otherwise, I just got to sit and be one of the people standing around and condoning it, right? That is true. It does not protect you to be among the ones who are not capable of trusting on the sanctity of the individual, right? To live in peace and harmony in their world, right? Yeah. So the sanctity of the individual is more important than the whole. Is that what you're saying? No, I'm not saying that. What made you think I was saying that? Because aren't all those people outside the room, your room, aren't they part of the whole? Yes, they're part of the whole, but they're part of the whole that is corrupt because they don't respect the sanctity of the individual. So if everybody respected the sanctity of the individual, then that would be for the betterment of the whole. But you're not I don't see how you can be supporting the sanctity of the whole or the betterment of the whole if you don't respect the sanctity of the individual to do what they choose. It doesn't deprive you of the right to do what you choose. And so, as far as I'm concerned, they're doing what they choose. If they stand around and, just gawk while somebody's being raped in the middle of the street or knifed in the street, then that's what they choose. But I also can choose to not play with them and I can choose to be angry. So that's the sanctity of my soul. Posting a note to myself that you are not easily manipulated, are you, by others? Were you trying to manipulate me? Yes, actually, I was. I was trying to see if you would agree that you were being too harsh with those people and you should play nicer. But apparently, you don't agree with that. No, I don't agree with it. And neither do I. I don't really agree with it, Stephanie. I was just playing the devil's advocate. Because you're right. If you don't stand up to them, and they are the bullies, because even if they're not there knifing that person in the street, they're the one condoning it. If there are 10 people standing around watching somebody being knifed in the street, they could all together rush that person and restrain them. Maybe somebody might get hurt, but that's the price you pay for being part of the whole, right? Right. Well, you stand up for your own. If you stand up for yourself, you stand up for everybody. That's the way I look at it. Those who stand up for themselves are standing up for everybody. And so your group is standing up for everybody. Yes, I would say that we are. Because you just trust on doing what you do and saying what you say, and it works all okay. So far, okay. I've thought about it. What would happen if people started to act in a different way that I couldn't tolerate, you know, and I would just go away. That's why I don't want to be a leader. People are just going to have to work together cooperatively, and everybody has the right to walk away. Otherwise, you're just a slave to the masses, I guess. Sorry. Everybody has to have the right to walk away and say, I'm not going to play that way. And I guess if everybody has the right to walk away and say, I'm not going to play that way, then, well, if everybody in the group said that, then they knew they always had that freedom, that they were free. Then the group would work together harmoniously, I would think. But if somebody comes in and thinks that they have to be in control because they don't feel free. They don't feel free to leave. They don't feel free to go off by themselves and say, I'm not going to play that way. If they don't have that freedom inside of themselves, then they are going to treat other people in a rather brutal way because they're going to treat other people as if they also have to be caged and they can't just get up and walk away. And eventually, you could get a group of people that would be like the people in the world that I see today, that just want to tell everybody else what to do. Everybody's got their God in a bottle on their shelf, and others have to bow to it. Not everybody, but what I'm saying is there's such a predominant number of people in the USA and the world that have their God in a bottle on a shelf. You know, we can see what happens when it gets really bad, like Hamas, the Trump followers, Putin, um, you know, all the examples throughout history, Nazis, the Romans, the Roman Catholic Church, on and on and on. They got their God in a bottle. Everybody has to bow down to them. It doesn't matter, you know, when anybody else says they got God on their side because they just take the bottle with them, put it in their backpack and say, hey, I got God in a bottle in my backpack, and therefore he's on my side. Maybe you have the ability to live in peace and harmony with me, because I think I could live in peace and harmony with you, because it makes me smile to hear you talk, because you're not a faded glory, you see. You're not someone who just says, well, I could have done this, or I could have done that, or I should have done this. You just say, I do what I do, and I say what I say, and I'm not going to apologize for it today, right? Well, that seems to be the case. Well, that's a rare quality in my experience, because most of the people that I dealt with in my day were pretty limited in their ability to function independently. They just couldn't function independently. They either had to be better or worse than somebody else, and if they were worse, they're always trying to be better, and if they were better, they were always afraid that they would get pushed off the hill, you see, go tumbling down and break their crown. Huh. I hadn't thought of that. That Jack and Jill went up the hill. It's kind of a mockery of, uh, you know, the whole King of the Hill thing in a way. They may not have been intended that way, but you fall down and break your crown. Uh-huh. More than anything else, a sense of humor can solve a lot of problems, can't it? It certainly can. So thank you for your sense of humor. Thank you, Stephanie, for your sense of humor. So let's delve into this issue a little bit deeper. Do you want to delve into it a little deeper? Sure. Now, I know Wendell or Mr. Holmes or however you prefer that I refer to you. I know that we have talked before, and you're not the Wendell Holmes Jr. that was the jurist, the judge, right? Right. And so I forget your history, but I think you might have started out as, were you a scientist? Or you were schooled in the scientific method and you were kind of looked at it that way, right? Yes. But over time you changed your point of view, right? Right. I came to see that reality could not be put in a bottle, as you say, with God. And really, reality is as flexible and as beautiful and as uncontrollable as God is. And so you might say they're a fully integrated pair, that God is integrated into reality. And so no problem there. It is the human part of the Trinity that thinks that it is divinity, when really it is the naivety of the broken toy. that thinks it is a boy. And it's just a broken toy laying on the ground. And waiting for someone to come and say, hey, you're a boy today, and jump up and play, please. But it never happens. It never happens for them because they're just a broken toy laying on the floor. And they can't get any more satisfaction out of life because life is not very satisfactory to them, is it? You know something? I have to say this. What I wanted to say is I woke up today and I was feeling a bit dreary. I was feeling a bit sore, not a lot, but just a little bit of like, oh my God, here I am, got to get up and get busy, dreariness, and a little teeny bit of achy, not much. And I thought, well, yesterday I spent like 6 to 7 hours working in my yard and the garden and driving around town getting things for the garden and also doing grocery shopping. So maybe longer than that, 8 hours for all that. And I love working in the garden. And once I'm in the grocery store, I'm okay, although I hate going to the grocery store. But I love working in the yard, in the garden, in the sunshine. Even it's hot, it's enjoyable. And we were putting up the swimming pool yesterday, so busy. So maybe a little bit of the ache in my body is from the work that I was doing yesterday. And I have been pretty sedentary doing all these sessions. So I was feeling kind of dreary today, like what happened to when I would just jump up in the morning and I would just be so excited to do things, which isn't so long ago. And I thought, well, it was when I had creative activities that really kept me busy. But I also had some kind of goal, like I would want to finish something. Um, and then I picked up the pendulum, and you're here. And that's kind of the cat in the hat. That's kind of like the cat in the hat. Come to refresh my day because I certainly wasn't expecting you to be here, and we haven't talked in God, what years? Um, and even then, only once or twice, few times. Um, so this is interesting. But anyway, tell me more about you. So, did you end up a college professor or something like that, or what did you do? No. However, I became a writer, dear, because I wanted to write out my thoughts in a way that caused people to say, hey, this guy knows something. We should pay attention to him. And so I got a little bit of a rep, but not the kind that you would expect. When people say, hey, I got it figured out, I want to help you figure it out today, they would just say, well, that's nice. You're a good writer. Have a good day. I'm going to look you up, Wendell, just so I have a context here. Okay, I'm now reading about you, and I will share some information. You were an American physician, poet, and polymath. Grouped among the fireside poets, he was acclaimed by his peers as one of the best writers of the day. His most famous prose works are the Breakfast Table series, and he was also an important medical reformer. In addition to his work as an author and poet, Holmes also served as a physician, professor, lecturer, inventor, and although he never practiced it, he received formal training in law. Okay, so what I remember about you telling me before was that you like to be called Wendell and not Oliver because in those days, when people came from a distinguished family, they would use the family name, right? Is that no? Putting my foot in my mouth here, but I hated the name Oliver. God, I hated that name because it was the same name as my tad bit bitter here, I know, but it was the same name as my mother's father. All right, Wendell, I just looked it up to make sure. And your mother's father was named Oliver, Oliver Wendell, and he was a judge, right? No. Oliver Wendell was the name that he shared with me. However, he was not a judge. He was an asshole. And he thought he needed to be elevated, you see, above his brethren. And so he would claim to be descended from an important family. And he would say that he should be the one who would make decisions for the family and for others, you see. And so he was elected to a certain position in the community that allowed him to participate as one of the adjudicators of the disputes and the guilt of certain individuals. So, more pomp than circumstance, shall we say. And he was a bastard to me. God, he was awful. And I hated that name more than I can say. And one day I told my mother, I said, I won't be called Oliver because all it does is bring me shame. And she said, well, it's a good name. And I think that it needs to be preserved for posterity because that name comes down from a long, long history of Olivers. And I said, okay, but I don't want to ever hear you call me that again. And she said, well, what should I call you? And I said, just call me son. And she said, well, what should others call you? And I said, well, they can call me Wendell because that will remind me of you. However, I don't want to be called Oliver anymore. She said, okay. And so she never called me Oliver again because she was a good mother and she loved me very much. And when the time came to name my son, she said, well, you know what you have to do, don't you? And I said, what? And she said, you have to name him Oliver. And I said, no way. I'm not going to give him that name. And she said, well, don't think of it as your grandfather's name. Think of it as the name of those patriots who came to America in order to escape from the cruel rule of the hypocritical government back in the day. And I said, okay, I guess I can do that because maybe enough time has gone by since he doesn't have to grow up the way I did under the thumb of that old man that we can call him Oliver. And so he became known as Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. And as you know, he became a well-known jurist. However, he was not the first to bear that name in shame because I had to explain to him why I wouldn't use it. And he said, well, I guess, Dad, I am glad that you named me that because I will redeem the name for you. I'll make you proud of me. And he did make me proud of him. He made me very proud of him. And that is the story of the name Oliver. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. As you know, my tendency is to research everything I'm told. And occasionally I come across a little discrepancy and then we talk about it and figure it out. But we did that in your life too, right? Yes. I had two lifetimes in the same area as a small child. And sometimes we get confused when we're here because we can confuse our histories, our own histories, until we go and check it out, because it's like saying you could remember living in a certain place and then you remember living in that place again, but it was two different lifetimes. And so you get a little confused about which lifetime you're in. Sort of like you might get confused about what school year you were in if you were in a certain school and then you moved away and then you moved back. You would say, well, I went to that school today. And someone might say, well, I thought you went to this other school. And you would say, well, yes, I did, but I had forgotten about that because all I remember is that I spent a couple years at this one school. And the other one was brief and gave me a lot of grief, so I don't really remember it too well. And so we can get confused in the way that we remember our own history. It does happen occasionally. And you caught it. And because you research everything and you came back and said, well, Mr. Holmes, it seems like this is not you because when I researched what you told me, it didn't check out. And I had to go back and look at it and say, by God, she's right. And so I guess it is a testament to how careful you are to make sure that you don't report anything inaccurately, even if others report it inaccurately to you, such as the time recently when Jesus told you that Benedict Arnold was hanged, and he was not hanged. He was hanged in effigy over and over again, even to this day. However, he got away with murder back in the day, didn't he? Yes, he did. And he is a mess today, isn't he? He certainly is a mess today. Even Jesus was trusting on his own memory of things he heard and others did say. And so the ability to make sure that we are as accurate as possible in what we say is very important so that all the strings don't get tangled up, right? Right. It's a little harder to untangle them once they get tangled up. And there's so much I can't research from history. There's so much I can't look up that I just have to trust sometimes that people are giving it to me straight from heaven's side. And that, like the example that was when, what's his name? Horace Mann told me he went to try to be in the Merchant Marines and they kicked him out and said he wasn't quality material, I guess. But I did quite a bit of research trying to find some evidence of that and I couldn't. So I guess it just never ended up in any historical. And maybe he didn't want to tell people about it. Maybe you don't want to tell people that you went and tried to do something and you weren't good enough for it. I guess physically he was not capable of doing what they required of him. Yes. You don't make a very good seaman if you can't breathe or you get seasick and you're vomiting all the time. So this is one of the things that you just have to accept for what they're worth, right? Right. Just got to accept it for what it's worth and not worry about it too much, but try to be as accurate as you can. And so you don't mislead anybody. And also, I don't like to have egg on my face that, I said something that is not right and people believed it. And so actually, I appreciate it when people can bring me some solid info that works. Like when I first connected with Steve, I would have practically begged people, give me some evidence that this is not Steve. And I didn't get it. All I got was more validations. And it's not to say that people couldn't come forward and say it isn't him. And there was one thing that he made, well, he lied a lot, so that was a problem. But there was one thing he made a big mistake about. And so that left me with a bit of egg on my face. And it was it was an honest mistake in the sense that he genuinely was confused about it and not about the main thing. He wasn't confused about that. He was just confused about his own perceptions and what was going on. And that happens a lot that, we all see things through our own peepers and we have our own story. But there's a shared reality. And so I would say a shared reality would be that you had a grandfather who was named Oliver, right? Right. Because you can trust on that, because other sources also trust on it. And so it's a shared reality. And so everybody can say, hey, that makes sense today. But if I said that and then you looked it up and my grandfather's name was Thomas, you would say, hey, Mr. Holmes, I can't trust on you today to have it right. Anyway, I got to say this. You must have been a very smart guy because it says you had a law degree and you were a physician, etc. And then you became a poet. And then there was something in your life that caused you to turn away from um, the the idea that everything was physical. Yes, I came to see that the morbidity of the physician's role was to stand by and watch his patients die. Because even if he could do something to slow down the process, eventually everybody would die. And if that was all there was, and you said bye bye, why bother trying to delay it? Just get it over with, and everything's done. And you could say everybody has a certain number of years to live, and if you give them an extra few, they might just live them in agony. So, what do you do? What do you do? And so I began to wonder about it, why this was so, why we bothered, if everybody was going to die in the end. It's like saying, if the cart's going to run off the cliff and it's inevitable, why do we keep hanging on to it? Why don't we just let it go and let it run off the cliff? Instead of wasting all our energy and our own ability to take a walk in the sunshine to save that darn cart. And so I had to look deeper, and I did look deeper. And I came to see that love was the answer, and that a lovely smile would take you a mile, and a happy glow. And so I came to see that we're all trusting on you, Stephanie. We're all trusting on you here to give us a happy smile. So you want to give me a happy smile? Of course. I'm happy to talk to you again, old friends. And I guess Lately, we've had a few old friends show up. Yes, that's the way I feel, an old friend. Because once we've chatted, it's like we renew an old friendship, don't we? That says we're all in this together. And if we can share our reality, if you can listen to me, and if you find a problem, you'll just come back to me and say, hey, I saw a problem, as you did when you came back to me and said, hey, some of the things you said about your childhood did not match up with the stories reported in the various accounts of your life. So can you explain that to me? And I would say, yes, I made a mistake. I made a mistake. So I'm not afraid to admit I made a mistake. It's not a sin to make a mistake. Well, it is, because that's what sin means, that you just screwed up. But the problem is when you can't figure it out and you just say, well, I didn't do that today. I didn't make a mistake. Then you're really tangled up because that means that you can't trust on your own history because you say, I couldn't have made a mistake. I didn't make a mistake. And then you are lost, you see. You're lost at sea because you can't see anything solid beneath you. And so when you can admit a mistake and you can figure it out, then you can get back on solid ground, right? Right. I feel that way. So I'm glad we're on solid ground today, you and me, and not trusting on the fact that we can't be so nice we don't get people angry at us. That is true. A little anger goes a long way, doesn't it, honey? Yes, it does. And so I like to be willing to stand up to the bullies or the mothers of the bullies who train their kids to be bullies. Yes, because it is deeply entrenched in the human psyche that people have to defend their turf. And they have to defend their turf by turning their own children into combatants, you see. And so they become so confused. They go out and they knife somebody in the street or rape them in the street. And all the ones who trust on protecting their own turf just stand there and say, hey, not our problem, not our problem today. Look at that man knife somebody right there in the street. We'll all just get out our phones and take pictures of it. And then we can be important, you see, because we'll post them on the internet and a lot of people give us a lot of likes and then they will know they like us. They like us because we didn't do anything. We just took pictures, you see. Exactly. Uh, so my absolute treat these days is talking to you guys because you have such a powerful point of view and listening to some of my friends too because they also have a powerful things to add. But you guys are very profound and deep in the way that you see things. And so it's kind of a, but then I have to say it's kind of a select group, isn't it? Because you, Wendell Holmes, you know, were a deep thinker, obviously. And somebody like Horseman had a goal. He had an idea about how he could, but you had the good of humanity. I don't want to think of it in terms of good and evil, but you had the concept of somehow contributing to the sanctity of the individual, I might say, and some learned, like when James Buchanan was talking to me the other day, me and Winnie, he revealed that he had kind of sold his soul to the devil. And so it's a different perspective. It's the ability, once you're outside it, to kind of look at, it's like you're looking in the globe at your life, and you say, well, I did this, I did that, I could have done the other, I could have done this. And so it's a perspective that we rarely, rarely, rarely see on the earth, where people can look at it and say, hey, I sold my soul to the devil that day, but without the guilt. Without the guilt. It's just kind of, hey, I learned from that kind of thing. But when you come back to earth and you get caught up in it again, you're in the globe. It's hard to get outside the globe and say, hey, I learned today. Do you know what I'm saying? Yes, I do know what you're saying. And I also understand something very, very powerful here, Stephanie. What I understand is that the capacity to understand this is available to everyone, however, they are glued in place. They can't unglue their feet in order to get outside that globe and say, hey, let me look at my life from outside of it, because it's what they trust on. And it's the way I was trained as a physician, that it's all very matter of fact, physicality, and there is no trust on spirituality. And I came to see that you can't call it physical and you can't call it spiritual, because it is a duality, of course, but you mix hot and cold and you get warm. And so once you understand this, there is no physicality and spirituality that are two separate domains. You mix them and you get warm. Do you think that's what people talk about when they mean non-duality, that you can have warm? Or what do they mean? No, I haven't seen that. I have been curious about that myself because of the tendency of people today to think that non-duality is a virtuous perspective, and I can't figure it out. I really can't figure it out, what they're trying to say. Are they trying to say that you're always stuck on a certain register? So, for instance, you could mix hot and cold and get warm, but it would always be the same warm. You couldn't adjust the faucets you see so that you had a little bit more hot or a little more cold to mix it up, you see? I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out either. I can't figure it out. Well, maybe someday somebody will be able to say, this is what I mean by non duality. And they will make sense to us. So if there's anybody out there that hears this and you trust on something called non duality, maybe you can come and explain it to us in a way that will make sense. For the remainder, like me and you, Steph, who believe in dualism, who rely, I shouldn't say that, who trust on dualism, we'll just say we got a hot water spigot and we got a cold water spigot, and we can mix the two. And so I can mix spirituality and physicality in order to change my point of view. So sometimes I wanted a little hotter and sometimes a little cooler in order to experience reality in a different way, right? Exactly. Exactly, Mr. Holmes. Like today, I'm enjoying talking to you, and that's very warm to me. So it's a mixture of what you could call spirituality and physicality. It's just reality. It's just reality at the moment. And yet at the same time, I could say, well, I'm going to go bake a cake today. And it's like, okay, that's just very physical kind of activity. Or I could go think about some, aspect of reality, such as photons and electrons and how they work and, time space continuum and stuff. And I could go think about that. And it would be a mixture of physicality and spirituality in another way that would be very different than just baking a cake. So it's like saying that the duality mixes up in a lot of different ways. There's the macrocosm and the microcosm, etc., depending upon which way you look, etc. So I don't understand it. Me neither. Well, it was nice talking to you. I don't want to keep you too much longer, and I hope that we can have more time to chat about such things. I hope so too, Mr. Holmes. And you didn't really believe, right, that I risked something fundamental by telling people if they tried to bully me or anyone else to call them on their shit? No, no, darling, not at all. Because I think we all need to call them on their shit and say, get your shit out of my face and put it in the proper place. And therefore, we all could benefit from a little more trust on being genuine, you see. I agree. Thank you. Bye bye. Bye, darling.